Jackson Knights, and welcome to the second installment of the Godzilla. Hey, my guest that I originally planned to have show up because he had to he had to opt out because he was busy with some stuff of his own. But hey, um, I'm here, so who cares? So today I will be discussing. Oh, KPF's already here. Hi, um, KPF. Do you want to join me for this by any chance? Anyway, so um, today I'll be discussing a sort of underrated installment of the Godzilla franchise, but also not so much underrated nowadays because it has gained some recognition. Um, Today I'll be discussing 1989's Godzilla versus Biollante. Yes, 1989. I find Kaiju Noir pointed this out in his review. So let me get this straight. It took them 5 years to make a sequel to a commercially successful Godzilla movie, yet it took them only 3 years to make a sequel to a commercially disappointing Godzilla movie. Anybody find that strange? So yes, 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante. Now I say underrated because for a long time it seems like this movie just was kind of overlooked in the overall franchise. Not many people talked about it, and when they did, it just kind of seemed like they wanted to just kind of gloss over it and move on to other stuff for some reason. And I never really understood why. Now, for a long time, I was not able to see this movie because, kind of like Return of Godzilla, for a long time, this movie was not readily available in the US on DVD or Blu ray. Which always drove me nuts because I really, really, really wanted to see this movie. This was probably one of the top 5 Godzilla movies that I really wanted to see. And I wasn't able to see it until I was a freshman in high school. I actually have some fond memories of this. I was dating um, a girl at the time, and her family was sorry, my nose itches. Her family were all Godzilla fans, which I felt like the luckiest guy in the world because not only am I dating a chick who's a Godzilla fan, but her family is a Godzilla or are Godzilla fans too. So that was awesome, and I had always told them about Godzilla versus Biollante and how I really, really, really wanted to see it. And after a little bit, damn it, stop bitching. Her mom, whose name is Lisa, she she downloaded the Godzilla vs. Biollante on her laptop, and she said, "If you want to watch it, go right ahead." And so I did. I was able to sit down finally and watch Godzilla vs. Biollante, English dubbed, I think. But hey, I was finally able to sit down and watch it, and I really, really, really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a very well made, very well done, very well executed Godzilla movie. And it was a very nice treat to finally get able to see a lost gem. Not to mention, I had my girlfriend at the time sitting next to me watching it too, so that was extra. That was an extra bonus. But so I didn't see it again for about a year or two until it was finally released on DVD in the States, and of course I was able to get my hands on this. Though this unfortunately has now gone out of print, but I'm going to be buying a copy of this anyway because this disc isn't in the greatest of shape. But anyway, so I purchased Godzilla vs. Biollante. Actually, I remember like it was yesterday because I bought it on the same Amazon package that I bought the Green Mile on. I think it was either Christmas or my birth. No, I think it was my birthday that I bought it for myself from Amazon for my birthday. And this was the first movie of that pack that I watched, and I loved it again. I think this is a fantastic, fantastic Godzilla movie. One of the most underrated installments of the entire franchise. Not so much nowadays because in recent years, I think it does have to do with the film being released on DVD in the States. A lot of people have come out to say that they do think that Godzilla vs. Biollante is underrated, and they say it's one of their favorite Godzilla movies. Like Zazabar, when he did Godzilla Palooza, he said this movie is one of his favorites as well, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Um, so there's my personal history with Biollante. Um, so with all that said, let's get into the plot of Godzilla vs. Biollante. So, in the aftermath of Godzilla's attack on Tokyo from the previous film, which is one thing I do like about this movie, is that it's clearly a direct sequel to the previous movie. Godzilla's cells are delivered to the Saradia Institute of Technology and Science. Saradia being a fictional country, though it's kind of like a mix between the Middle East and Europe, I think. And where the Godzilla cells are to be merged with genetically modified plants in the hope of transforming Saradia's deserts into fertile land and ending Saradia's economic dependence on oil wells. Dr. Genshiro Shiragami and his daughter Erika are enlisted to assist with the project. However, a terrorist bombing destroys the laboratory, ruining the cells in the process and also, unfortunately, killing Erika. 5 years later, Shiragami has returned to Japan and merged with some of Erika's cells with that of a rose in an attempt to preserve her soul. Sounds familiar. And scientists Kazuhito Kirishima and Lieutenant Goro Gondo of the JSDF are using the Godzilla cells that they themselves have collected in order to create a substance known as ANEB, anti-nuclear energy bacteria, hoping they can use the substance as a weapon against Godzilla should he return. Wink, wink. And they attempt to recruit Shiragami to aid them in completing anti-nuclear energy bacteria. However, Shiragami refuses. International tensions increase over the Godzilla cells as they are coveted by both the Saradia Institute of Technology and Science and also the American Biomajor organization. An explosion from Mount Mahara causes tremors across the sea, including Shiragami's home, which ends up badly damaging the roses. And Shiragami later agrees to join the JSDF's effort and is given access to the Godzilla cells, which he secretly merges with one of the roses, which you'd think he'd get into pretty big trouble over, but he doesn't. And one night later, rival Biomajor and Saradian agents, they break into Dr. Shiragami's lab. God damn. Nose itches. Sorry. However, they are attacked by a large plant-like creature, which really brings to mind Little Shop of Horrors, though of course being the remake, which I think came out in 1986. Actually, let me look that up. Yep, 1986. I was right. Good movie. Anyway, so this large plant-like creature later escapes into Lake Ashino, and this creature is named Biollante by Dr. Shiragami. You didn't miss much, JT is Reborn, though you did miss my personal history with the film, but if you want to rewind that and check that out, you may. So anyway, Biomajor agents, they then plant explosives around Mount Mahara and they issue an ultimatum to the Diet of Japan, which essentially is give us the Godzilla cells or we'll blow these up and release Godzilla. Simple as that. Wow. You're that petty? So Kirishima and Gondo attempt to trade the G cells with the Seradia agents, or not the Seradia, but the Biomajor agents. But Seradian agent SSS-9 thwarts the attempt and escapes with the cells, and also manages to knock over the bus that contains the controls for the explosives around Mount Mahara, and they are fixed to go off despite their best attempts. And actually, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie where, as the countdown reaches one of the Japanese agents goes, "Amen." Kaboom! Mount Mahara erupts, and Godzilla is released. And another one of my favorite Godzilla scenes, where the Mount Mahara is erupting, and Godzilla is slowly walking out of the crater of Mount Mahara. You hear the Godzilla theme playing, and he roars. Oh my god, it's an awesome scene. um, so of course, Godzilla attempts to reach the nearest nuclear power plant in order to replenish his supply of nuclear energy. However, Biollante calls out to Godzilla, but not before he engages in a fight with a super weapon known as the Super X2, which is a remote controlled version of the Super X. It's a little smaller. It's also green in color. And it also has a weapon that is able to fight back against Godzilla, which is simply known as the Fire Mirror. It's essentially a solar absorption device that absorbs Godzilla's atomic ray and then fires it back at Godzilla, and actually is successful in injuring Godzilla. However, too many shots from Godzilla's atomic ray causes the fire mirror to heat up and melt and malfunction, and the Super X2 is called back to the Japanese mainland to be repaired. So Godzilla arrives at Lake Ashino and engages in Biollante being in her first Rose form, engages her in a vicious battle, but after being impaled and strangled a few times, Godzilla eventually manages to cut her down with his atomic breath. Godzilla proceeds towards the power plant at Suruga. However, Miki Sagusa, making her first appearance in the Heisei Godzilla series, unfortunately, uses her powers to divert Godzilla towards Osaka instead, causing herself to collapse from the mental strain in the process. A team led by Gondo meet Godzilla at the central district of Osaka, and they fire rockets infused with anti-nuclear energy bacteria into Godzilla. Shot of Aneb into Godzilla's mouth. However, appearing to be unaffected, Godzilla leaves the city. Hiroshima recovers the G cells and returns them to JSDF, and Shiragami theorizes that if Godzilla's body temperature is increased, the bacteria should work against it. Which does make sense, because bacteria spreads a lot quicker if it's in warmer environments. If it's in cold environments, it really just kind of slows down. And the JSDF erects microwave-emitting electronic plates during an artificial thunderstorm, hitting Godzilla with lightning and heating up his body temperature during a battle with the Japanese military in the mountains outside Osaka. However, Godzilla is only moderately affected. However, the final form of Biollante arrives and engages Godzilla in battle once again, in one of my favorite Godzilla battles of all time. However, the fight ends after Godzilla fires his atomic ray inside Biollante's mouth, blowing out the back of her head, thus killing her, of course. An exhausted Godzilla collapses onto the beach with his face splashing into the ocean water, and Biollante disintegrates into the sky, forming an image of Erica amongst the stars. Shiragami, though, her father, who was watching this scene, is killed by SSS-9. Kirishima chases the assassin, and after a brief scuffle, SSS-9 is killed by a microwave emitting plate that's been activated by one of the Japanese military officials. Godzilla reawakens, the anti-nuclear energy bacteria being snuffed out because of Godzilla's face being in cold water, and he leaves out towards the ocean, thus ending the movie. So how about this plot? Pretty freaking solid, if I don't say so myself. It's a great sequel, in my opinion. And now that I realize it, this may be one of the greatest monster movie sequels ever made, in my opinion. I think the plot, it's very original. It's very well thought out. It's very well executed. It's got a great mix of dark, gritty human action, political and economic. What's the word? Espionage, I suppose you could say. And great monster action. This is a really, really, really solid movie, in my opinion. So let's get into the pros of Godzilla vs. Biollante. First off, once again, the dark tone of this movie is absolutely superb. Um, I'd actually go as far to say this movie is darker than its predecessor. You see a lot more people getting killed. There's a lot more monster, which thankfully they do bring back another monster for Godzilla to fight. There's a lot more monster gore. Um, there's no like red blood or anything, but you do see Godzilla get impaled and stabbed and strangled quite a few times throughout the movie. Um, the movie is shot in a very dark way. A lot of this movie does take place at night, and it does give it this kind of dark and doomish vibe, which is awesome. This dark tone of this movie is absolutely fantastic, in my opinion. Once again, it does something that a sequel should do right. It's that take something that was good in its predecessor and move it into the successor and just improve upon it even more so. So that's awesome. Pro number 2 is the music score by Koichi Sugiyama. I believe this was his only Godzilla movie. A lot of people don't really care for the music score in this movie. And actually, in some instances, I can kind of understand why, because there's a lot of really 80s. There's a lot of really 80s music in this movie. However, that never really bothered me because well, this is an 80s movie, so it would make sense to have 80s music in it. Um, and not to mention, you still do have some Akira Fukube tracks throughout the film. But I think the music score for this movie is really, really, really solid. Koichi Sugiyama's music, it's dark when it needs to be. It's sort of lighthearted when it needs to be. However, that's kind of rare. It's action-packed and bombastic when it needs to be. This is usually during the action scenes with Godzilla versus the military or whenever Godzilla fights Biollante. Koichi Sugiyama's music score for this is fantastic, in my opinion. I think it's really well done. It's not one of my favorite music scores, but it certainly fits the film, and I think it's just fine. Pro number 3 is the decent human action in this movie. Now, this is admittedly kind of one thing that I will give credit for in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is that the human action scenes in that movie, they're not bad. And they're not bad in this movie either. You see a lot of like the opening scene of this movie doesn't feel like a Godzilla movie. It feels like an 80s action movie. Because you have humans shooting at each other. It kind of feels like a scene out of Commando. It's not as awesome as Commando, I'll full-heartedly admit, but it's really entertaining. And also the music, which is kind of like a modified version. It's an 80s synth version of the Godzilla theme playing. It sounds a little ridiculous, but it actually does fit that scene very, very, very well. Um, very enjoyable to watch. And overall, there's bits of human action throughout the movie. Usually, it's over. Actually, no, it's always over Biomajor or Seradia or the Japanese science community. Yes, Commando is a masterpiece, but it's always about these three factions fighting over the Godzilla cells. Um, So, well, some people may say it gets a little old. I think it's just fine. It does make sense because it goes into the next pro that I have for this movie. Actually, hang on, let me write it down. Okay. So overall, the human action in this movie, it is really entertaining, and it just in general goes to make this movie feel even more unique than it already is. So pro number 4 is the Godzilla arms race plot point, as I just wrote down. One thing I do like about the Heisei series is that it continues to show Godzilla's effect on not just Japan but on the entire world. Um, but not just in the physical sense of the Japanese people's lives, but also in the economic sense and the political sense. Because if something like Godzilla was around, you can bet your ass that at least our government would be trying to get their hands on some of his cells and try to weaponize it in some way. Even though I'm in most other media, I would say that I'm not a big fan of that because it just goes to show that the government doesn't. No, I'm not going to say that because the government's always trying to create bigger and better weapons. Here it makes sense, and here it's done well. I think it's pretty interesting to see how this turns out, and it's interesting to hear the characters talk about. Well, we have bombs to bombs, guns to guns, missiles to missiles. Now we have Godzilla cell weapons to Godzilla cell weapons. It's the next arms race, though. So in a way, um, Dr. Serizawa's fear of having an oxygen destroyer arms race, well, it hasn't completely come true. Something similar to that has come true. So I go this far to say his sacrifice was almost pointless. Not quite in this movie, but especially in Godzilla versus Destroya, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So the Godzilla arms race plot point, I think it's really interesting. It certainly is very original, and the writer for this movie, let's see, Kazuki Omori, while also done by Shinichiro Kobayashi. You two guys did a really good job on doing something original for once. And let's see. Pro number 5 is the military action in this movie, Godzilla versus the military. Really, really, really entertaining. Really fun to watch. Easily trumps anything that was done in Godzilla 1984. Granted, not to say that the stuff in 1984 was bad, but I just think here it's even better because here they include laser cannons. I mean, because laser cannons are always awesome. But I grew up with the laser cannons. One of my favorite Godzilla movies is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, and that movie is full of laser cannons. So I always really like those, and I noticed that. You again. Why? Why can't you speak normally? Seriously, why can't you speak normally? Moving on. Um, where was I? Oh yeah, the military action in this movie is really well done. There's a lot of explosions going on. There's a lot of animated lasers going around. Missiles and bullets and bombs and missiles are going back and forth. It's really, really, really entertaining to watch. Um, and this is one thing I still will praise about the Godzilla series is that Godzilla versus the military is really, really well done. And of course, this was because this was the first Godzilla movie where Koichi Kawakita was on to do the special effects. Now, Koichi Kawakita would take up the baton for special effects from this movie up until, I believe, Rebirth of Mothra 2. That being his last Godzilla movie, because I do believe he passed away not long after Rebirth of Mothra 2. He started off at Subaraya Productions working on Ultraman and also Zone Fighter. However, Toho was impressed with Kawakida's work on the 1989 film Gunhead, which was also put out by Toho, and which that movie was supposed to be another Godzilla sequel, where it was essentially Godzilla versus Skynet. Essentially, can't deny that would have been kind of cool, but that was turned into the movie Gunhead, which is kind of a Terminator ripoff, but still it's cool. So Toho saw his work on Gunhead and they were impressed. And they said, "Hey, you want to work on Godzilla?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So they brought him on board and they kept him here from. Yep, he kept on from Biollante up to Rebirth of Mothra 2. However, his last true thing that he worked on was, I believe, he acted in GMK. The last piece of tokusatsu work that he worked on was Toho's Grand Sazers TV show, which I think was in 2003. Which that was it was basically Toho's version of Super Sentai, but it was very successful at the time. But let's see, he died. Oh, he died in 2014. Oh, okay, so never mind. He was born in 1942 and he passed away in 2014. So may he rest in peace. Great special effects guy. He's probably one thing that I will always praise about the Heisei series. I don't like the Heisei series that much, but I really, really, really do like the special effects for this series. And it just gets better on and on and on. That's one thing I will praise about King Ghidorah and kind of Mothra 92. I mean, those are my two least favorite Godzilla movies, but the special effects for those movies are pretty solid. Okay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pro number 6 is the monster battles. There's really only two. Godzilla versus Rose Biollante, and then there's Godzilla versus Final Form Biollante, which, by the way, that leads me into a neutral point that I want to make about this movie, is that originally this movie was supposed to have a third monster, which is basically like a giant rat called Deutalos, I believe. And there was going to be a scene in this movie that would have shown Godzilla actually eating this monster, showcasing that he was carnivorous. However, I guess Toho thought that would be too gruesome. And I think that's a damn shame, because I really would have liked to see that, because Godzilla has teeth. What the hell else is he going to use them for? For show? Go to the dentist and say, "I have no cavities." Haha. What the hell else is he going to use them for? He's going to use them to eat. But whatever. I really would have liked to see that scene in this movie, but they cut it out. But whatever. At least I know it was supposed to be there. But anyway, the monster battles in this movie, I think they're really cool. They're a little slow. I'll admit they're a little slow, especially Godzilla versus Rose Biollante. It's a little slow because Biollante doesn't move that. Rose Biollante doesn't move at all. She just uses her tendrils and her vine mouths to bite, stab, and constrict and spit acid all over Godzilla. But it is still entertaining, and it's really interesting to see Godzilla face off against an adversary like that. And ultimately, he does make it very entertaining. The best monster battle, of course, is Godzilla versus Final Form Biollante. Because Final Form Biollante is able to move around. She still has the vines and the vine mouth, the Venus flytrap mouths on the ends of her vines to bite, stab, constrict, and spit acid. However, Biollante also has her own mouth projectile, which is essentially radioactive plant sap, which is like acid to Godzilla. By the way, Godzilla gets burnt up and spit on and puked on and scarred pretty nastily in this movie. He gets one of his hands impaled with a vine. He gets bitten and constricted and impaled in the shoulder. He gets acid spit all over his face and his shoulders. Godzilla kind of gets his ass beat. It's not as horrendous as the beating he takes in Hedorah, but thus far it's a pretty nasty beatdown he gets. However, he also lays the smackdown on Biollante. Of course, his greatest weapon being his atomic ray, and this is also the first Godzilla movie where we ever see Godzilla's nuclear pulse attack, where Godzilla is wrapped up and constricted by a bunch of vines, and he emits atomic energy from his body, which essentially disintegrates the vines constricting around his body, thus being the nuclear pulse attack. One second. So, the monster battles, they're really fun. I can understand why some people would say they're a little slow. Me personally, though, I don't mind them. Um, I think they're really fun to watch. And pro number, let's see, 7 is the special effects in this movie are outstanding, absolutely outstanding. Nothing against Teruyushi Nakano. He did really good special effects in the previous film, but Koichi Kawakida's effects, oh my god, they're so freaking good. The Godzilla suit in this movie, I believe it's called Biogoji, which is rather fitting. Yes, it is. So, of course, Godzilla gets a new look again in this movie. And the overall design for this suit would set the trend for the rest of the Godzilla franchise suits, which are featured in the Heisei era. To convey a feeling of general mass and power, the head was reduced and the neck was elongated. And the face was also changed to have Godzilla appear to be a little more feline in appearance. And significant musculature was added, particularly around the chest and thigh area. Thus, the infamous Thunder Thighs Godzilla appearance was made. The irises were also enlarged to fill most of Godzilla's eye sockets, which projects the impression of mammalian cunning. The fangs were a little reduced in size. However, Godzilla's were increased to a double row of sharp teeth on both of his jaws, and the lateral dorsal fins were enlarged almost to the size of the center row. However, the largest of which were more around Godzilla's shoulder blade, so it doesn't appear to be as strangely put together as the previous suit. And also, like the previous suit, this one weighed in at a whopping 242 pounds. However, it was actually built to fit suit actor Kentaro Satsuma, who, of course, returns from the previous movie, making it much easier for the actor to move around. And also, a second suit was used in filming water scenes. However, this one was much slimmer at 176 pounds. There's also a puppet that was created of Godzilla's head, neck, and shoulders that was used for a lot of close-up shots. And of course, this suit was modified to create the Gido Goji suit for the next movie, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. And also, like the previous suit, this suit was stolen. On March 17th, 1992, someone snuck into Toho's special effects department and stole the suit from Toho Studios, and it remained stolen for several weeks. However, ultimately, an old lady discovered the stolen suit laying on a beach near Tokyo Bay in a very poor state. It was returned to Toho and repaired in time to be used in both the underwater fight sequences with the larval Batra for Godzilla vs. Mothra, and for Godzilla's rise from the erupting Mount Fuji scene also in Godzilla vs. Mothra. Its last appearance before a well-earned retirement. However, this suit appears to have been repaired several times after its retirement, meaning that it is one of the better preserved suits that are still known to exist. And this suit is one of the oldest Heisei era kaiju suits to remain intact and well preserved. And it is also the oldest suit from Godzilla suit from the Heisei era to be intact. No, that's not true. But overall, the Biogoji suit in this movie, I think it's fantastic. It's it definitely conveys a sense of mass and power. And it is the archetype for the Heisei design Godzilla suit, or the Heisei Godzilla design that would be used for the rest of the series pretty consistently. So, and also the special effects, the explosions are really good. The wire works for Godzilla's tail and the Super X are really well done. The wire works for Biollante, especially with her vines, I can only guess that it must have been a gigantic pain in the ass. A gigantic pain in the motherfucking ass to do all the wire works right for the various vines used for the Biollante model. And apparently this model required 32 wires to operate, which, like I said, must have been a giant pain in the ass. So the wire work is really well done. I've never seen a single wire. So that goes to show that Koichi, even though this was Koichi Kawakida's first Godzilla movie, you can tell that he was at the top of his game here. And also a little bit of trivia, they did have an idea to use stop motion for this movie for Godzilla for Godzilla fighting Biollante, and there does exist some test footage of the Godzilla stop motion. However, I am glad that they used pseudomation instead of stop motion because, while stop motion, I have nothing against it, especially with Godzilla. I just prefer my Godzillas to have suits on, not stop motion. But still, that is a little interesting piece of trivia. But overall, the special effects are absolutely fantastic. Koichi Kawakita just knocks it out of the park in this movie. And while he does have a couple of shortcomings, but this will show up in later in later Godzilla movies in this series. Kawakita is fantastic in this film, in my opinion. So with all that good stuff to say about this movie, are there any cons? There's two. The first one is that I think the human cast is a little bland in this movie. Let's see. None of them really give bad performances per se. Kunihiko Mitamura as Kazuhito Kirishima, he's not bad, but he's just a stereotypical no-nonsense military badass. He kind of reminds me of Captain Sano from the X from Outer Space, which I have just now seen, and those two are twins. He's just a no-nonsense badass who has no sense of humor. Yeah, he's as bland as a plateau. Megumi Odaka as Miki Sagusa, this being her first appearance. She doesn't have that many scenes, but thank God, but I just don't like Miki Sagusa. I'm sorry. And then there's Koji Takahashi as Jinichiro Shiragami. Boring as shit. I never get a sense of his sense of loss. He just has the same expression on his face throughout the entire movie. And it's just, he looks like he's bored. He's like a modern day Korea Senda in my eyes. He just looks like he's bored the entire movie. So no, I don't like Jinichiro Shiragami that much. The only character that I guess I kind of do like is Major Sho Kuroki, but that's only because he has a little bit of a sense of humor to him. but that's it. I think the human cast is pretty bland in this movie. SSS9, he's just a no nonsense badass bad guy, generic bad guy. He has no personality other than he's cold and he's heartless. That's it. So I'm not the biggest fan of the human cast. And the next con is that the English dialogue in this movie is so freaking awful. Not necessarily the English dub, though the English dub it's just kind of okay in my eyes. I mean, I've heard worse, but I've also heard better. But the actual English dialogue said by there's one scene where Shiragami says it, and then there's a scene where the head of the Seradia Science and Technology Center is speaking in English. Um, Shiragami's English, he has a heavy Japanese but also kind of German accent to his English dialogue, and it's really distracting. But also, the worst is the head of the Seradia Science and Technology Center. He has the most exaggerated and irritating Italian and French accent to his English dialogue I've ever heard in my entire life. To quote Andres Perez from his review of Biollante, oh, this movie. The English dialogue in this movie is just horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. And it sticks out like a sore thumb. It takes me out of the movie every time I hear it, and I just start busting out laughing whenever I hear it. It's unintentionally funny. Oh, the English dialogue in this movie is so terrible. So, but with all that said about this movie, this is an awesome, awesome, awesome Godzilla movie. I think it's pretty underrated. It's one of my favorite Godzilla movies of the entire series. Um, Easily in my top five. I'm gonna go that far. It's easily in my top five. It's a great Godzilla movie. Really, really entertaining. Very well made. The monster effects are awesome. The monster battles are awesome. The music is great. Overall, this is a great movie in my eyes. Now, it's a shame that it was commercially a commercial failure, despite receiving good reviews. And unfortunately, it led to Toho, in my eyes, doing a very, very big mistake with the next two movies. And we won't get another original Godzilla movie where Godzilla fights an original monster for another 5 years. And next time, we're going to get through a tough one. One of my absolute least favorite Godzilla movies ever made. But I'll get into that in just a minute. So my overall rating for Godzilla vs. Biollante, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. I wanted to give it a perfect 10, but because the characters are bland and the English dialogue in this movie is just so fucking bad, I can't in good conscience give it a good 10 out of 10. But a 9.5, it's one of my favorite Godzilla movies. It's very, very underrated. It's an awesome movie. Check it out. So look forward next time as I have JT is Reborn with me as we tackle one of my absolute least favorite Godzilla movies. It's a huge fan favorite. Many, many, many people say it's one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. And I just feel like an alien from a different planet saying just why. When I review 1991's giant disappointment, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. So post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. I don't have my shades on me. They're in my bed. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. And as always, go out and genetically breed a Godzilla plant hybrid so it can bite you in the ass in the end. And I will see you guys in the next one.